Hi everyone. It's Ashley. I have a very special guest with me today. I know you guys haven't seen my face in a minute. I've been just busy with driving and everything else and dealing with everything on the road. Um, but I'm going to go ahead and bring him up and let him introduce himself, and we'll go from there. Hi, Mark. How you?
Hey, Ashley. Thank you so much for having me here. How are you doing?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, thank you. I feel like we're very far away. I'm in the UK, but I'm so happy to be invited on this wonderful podcast. So thank you.
Absolutely. So, explain to everybody a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, sure. So hello, everyone. Um, my name is Mark Cusack, and I'm currently in Liverpool in the UK. I'm originally from Scotland, and I am a content creator, author, lecturer, and coach. And I support people who have kind of difficulties with their sexuality or gender, and particularly people who might fall outside of those kind of more recognized categories. So maybe people who are on the bi or pan spectrum, maybe asexual, non-binary, gender fluid people, um, and anybody who feels that they don't quite fit. So I run a platform called Not Defining, which is on YouTube, Instagram, where we TikTok threads, and I create kind of content sharing views and information about all that kind of side of the spectrum. And I am bringing out a book as well on fluid sexuality, which I'm very excited about. So that's really what I do.
Okay. That sounds really interesting, actually. Um, let's see. It's been forever since I've done a podcast. Excuse me if I'm just a little bit out of the ordinary. I don't know of any questions that could pop in my head at this very given moment. I'm sorry, I'm terrible at this type of stuff. I don't know why they even had me do it instead. uh,
That's all right. I love to talk and I love to chat, and sometimes I feel like the best kind of podcast episodes, they're not so much like a formal question and answer. It's not a formal thing. It's just two people chatting really, and relating. So it's lovely to chat with you today.
right. Um, so since uh, you're an author and everything else, do you have any published work by chance?
Well, I've actually just recently announced a book which is called Fluid, a guide for people with flexible sexuality, and it's available to order now. And so that's my first book. I've also contributed to some others, but it's really the first guide out there for people who maybe their sexuality or their feelings or their attractions or their identity has kind of like maybe like shifted or changed or evolved over time. And it's really just an accessible guide for anyone who kind of, as I said before, lives in that in between space. Maybe they're not quite sure exactly where they fit or what their identity is. So I'm really excited. You can type Mark Cusack Fluid, um, and it's available now to order from basically all of the big places where you would buy books and things. So it really culminates like all of the work that I do online, and puts it all in one neat little place. So I'm very excited about that. But I write for magazines and do articles and all kinds of things. I just try to get really the message out there through any medium that I can. So that's why I'm so delighted to be on this podcast as well, because it's just about talking about our identities and experiences and stuff, isn't it? Just so that maybe someone somewhere will hear it or read it and go, oh, that's me as well, you know.
Right. And I mean, I'm very out and open about who I am as a person. It goes without saying. Um, but that's definitely something that I would buy, and I'll definitely have to read it because it sounds really interesting. I would love to see everybody else's struggles as far as how they identify and figuring out who they are as a person and everything as far as that's concerned, whether it's gender or sex or any of the above, honestly. Um, that's definitely something that's very interesting to me.
Yeah, well, I would love for you to read it. We have some contributors, so it's not just me rambling on, but we have 8 different contributors, and we have trans experiences in there as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that, I identify as non-binary or gender fluid. Uh, and I know that some people put these two terms together, and that's okay. But I don't personally identify as trans, as in the kind of the classic sense, perhaps. So I really wanted to reflect that. We have some two-spirit experiences in there, which is really interesting. Um, in terms of fluidity and things, and how they see sexuality and gender, and how gender fluidity and your kind of sexuality merges together, and the links between those. So I'm really, really excited. We've got some people from the US represented in there, as well as
Oh,
other people from other places. Um, so yeah, I'm
so it's seeing
excited.
everybody's point of view on from like a global perspective. And that's amazing because I know
Yeah,
growing up in rural West Tennessee here in the states, it was very taboo to be anything but straight. Like that was it. That's all you could be.
yeah,
And so once I got out on my own and was doing everything, is whenever I started experimenting with who I was and then kind of figuring out from there. But
yeah. And that's really kind of similar to my experience as well, because um, although I think sometimes people feel like the UK is a little bit more, I don't know, liberal, maybe. I'm not sure. But I think in the US, perhaps you have like more liberal parts and then like more conservative parts. So you have like all extremes. You
there's a
have like
huge
everything.
huge
Exactly.
swings. I mean, and the thing is that you can be in a very conservative state, but the metropolitan areas are very liberal, have the liberalistic ideas, everything else. So it's
Yeah.
just all based on where you're at in the state.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some people, perhaps from like European countries, wouldn't really understand that. They might say, "Oh, the US is like this or the US is like that," but it's so vast, and there are so many different experiences and things. And I have the pleasure of connecting with so many people um, from the US and other countries, and I think because I'm a like English speaking platform, I think most of my audience on my YouTube channel at Not Defining are actually from the US. So it's uh, it's just a numbers thing, obviously. So it's really, really wonderful, and I love to hear the perspectives. I think as well in the UK, it's funny because we have like obviously like the 4 nations that make up the UK, and I grew up for a little bit in England, but most of my life in Scotland, and Scotland is unfortunately like kind of behind, when it comes to that. And I had a very, very religious, very conservative upbringing, which was interesting. Uh,
I
being
can
as
only imagine. I mean, same
yeah,
experience here.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah, yeah. So I'm sure that you will relate a little bit, and it's funny because even within that, even within that, you have people's beliefs on paper and the stuff that they say, and then you have their personalities, and a lot of people have a very mixed relationship with like family and stuff like that. People can be very kind, very loving, very caring, but then hold these really, really unkind and uncaring beliefs, and like the dissonance of that, especially growing up, can be really tough to like navigate. So I had,
Right.
I had to navigate that myself.
So, not trying to get too political on this one, but what are your how do you feel about everything that's going on stateside as far as, you know, how
Oh, I know.
everything's going over here? I try not to get political in these things just because everybody's opinions differ so much and it's always an argument, unfortunately, especially stateside. It's back and forth. You're either one way or the other, and it's like, no, I'm centrally. I like people over here, I'm like here. I mean, I
Yeah,
can see down both sides of the aisle, but I would love to hear your viewpoints on it.
yeah, and I mean, obviously, my heart just goes out to everyone in the US who is struggling in our community. I know that there's a small part of our LGBT community that did kind of vote Republican and things like that. Uh, but I know that from what I from what I hear from our community, a lot of people are very concerned and worried and things. And I think in Europe, we just kind of look on and just really feel for you all. You know,
Right.
I think we have also had, um, I guess, similar scenarios. We had something called Section 28 in the UK a little while ago, which was about kind of banning any talking about LGBT issues with like kids and stuff like that, and like banning books and that kind of thing. Um, and that was under our conservatives, so like our right wing party. And I know that there's the kind of the don't say gay um, laws and that kind of thing. And so it really like it's it's not so new to us, and it's not something that we are safe from. And the
Right.
transphobia and things like that, it's very, very real for us as well. We have a lot of it going on, a lot. We've just had um, laws coming in banning puberty blockers and banning other sorts of things for trans healthcare and stuff. So um, I guess we just, yeah, we're with you. And there's a right wing move, I guess, across Europe and across the US and things.
Mm.
Um,
So, Jess
yeah.
says, are you finding more LGBTQ Americans moving to your area because of the political situation here?
So I never thought that I would live in a world where I said this,
Right.
but I have had conversations with some people who are genuinely thinking about moving away if they
I've thought
can.
about it myself. I can't say anything. I mean,
Have you? Yeah,
I'm over everything here. Like,
yeah,
I love where I live currently, but unfortunately, it's a very, very, very deeply conservative state. And I mean, granted, California is just as beautiful, but that's on the opposite side of the U.S. from where I'm at, and that's a huge undertaking. If I was to say I wanted to move out there, I mean, that's a huge undertaking. That's, oh Lord, probably 2,000, 2,500 miles from here, and yeah, it's just a nightmare as far as trying to move. If I was going to move to a better area as far as for LGBTQ individuals. Um,
Yeah.
but hi, Robert.
Yeah. It's I'm I'm so touched, to hear you say that, because I just, it's real, isn't it? It's real, and you would be
Real is
very,
very
very welcome
scary.
over here. Uh,
Very scary times
so
over here. I
yeah,
mean,
we'll
it's like
take you
one day you
all.
have your rights, and then you might wake up the next morning and then you have none. And that's unfortunately the way that it goes with the current administration. And I hate it because I do love living here. I'm I'm not say very patriotic, but I mean, I do love my country. And I
Yeah,
hate to see it go down this rabbit hole that it's going, and it sucks, honestly.
yeah, no,
um,
absolutely. We really feel for you, and come and visit, come and stay. We're very welcoming. Sometimes we have our own, shall we say, conservative rules about immigration and things like that. But no, I think it's a time. It's a time for us to pull together. And do you know what? Our community has been through a lot. We have only in very recent times started to get any kind of rights and recognition. And that's what we do best. We stick together. We know how to support each other, and we've weathered a lot. So we're going to weather this. We don't know exactly how it's going to turn out, but that's what Not Defining is all about. Just a place for everybody to come and connect with each other, and get that strength from each other. So
right.
yeah.
So, just simple curiosity, and Jess is curious as well. He says, "What is the trucking industry like with the LGBTQ community in the UK?"
So I was a little nervous to come on a podcast, which is, the trucking community, because, and I never get nervous being on podcasts because it's kind of what I do and what I love. But I said, well, I don't know anything about trucking. I mean, my uncle, my dear uncle, who lives in Kilmarnock in Scotland, he is a trucker, and he has been for over 20 years.
Oh wow.
Um, and but that's the only connection that I have to it. I would be terrible driving a truck. You should never let that happen. But I do know that it tends to be quite a conservative, let's say, kind of male-dominated kind
So
of
very similar here to the States,
yeah, I'm kind of macho
unfortunately.
type of sector, and you do have those sectors, where certain types of behaviors, certain types of like,
Robert, behave yourself.
yeah. What is Robert doing? Robert, what's going on?
He says your accent is so cute.
Oh, thank you, Robert. Don't behave yourself. Just continue on. I accept all compliments about my accent. I love your guys' accents as well. The feeling is really mutual. I love the US. I've had the privilege of coming to the US a few times. Oh my goodness, I just have the best time every time. I feel like I'm in a movie, because that's what we grow up with. And it's like, oh my God, this is real. So I love it.
So where all have you been over here in the States?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I went on a road trip um, around the kind of the South. So kind of like Mississippi. I went to Nashville, Tennessee. I went to Atlanta, Georgia. I went to New Orleans. Um, I I have a I was going to say a crazy aunt. I don't think she'll be listening to this podcast, but I have an aunt who I think she would self-define as crazy. She's bonkers. She lives in Florida, um, and so I went to visit her there. She's mad. I absolutely love her, and I've been to New York and I've been to Chicago. So each time was just utterly wonderful. The music, the food, the friendliness of people is just wonderful. So
Is it
yeah.
not like that over in the UK? People are not friendly over there?
Depends where you go, but I think there's obviously everywhere in the US is different, but I think there's just a culture that is different. I think in the UK, people tend to be a little bit more reserved, a little bit more kind of like formal. Um, Whereas in the US, everything's just like bigger and people are just open, more open. Um, and I really like that because I'm quite like that. As a Brit,
Right.
I'm on the American side of the spectrum. I love to. I'm like, hey, how you doing? Like I want to
Right.
chat. So I feel at home when I'm in the States. But one thing that I did kind of learn is that, especially in the South, I was like, oh, everyone's so friendly, everyone's so nice, everyone's so kind and loving and everything and welcoming
That's
and
surface level.
right. And then somebody, I think it was a taxi driver, actually said, oh yeah, because but you guys are all like, you're white and you're kind of British and you're certain image of people. And so I kind of I got that, and I understand the layers of things. So
Right. Unfortunately, racism is still very common in the States, and it should not be, but
yeah, but
here we
it
are.
was wonderful.
I mean,
It
no,
was
there should homophobia, transphobia, any of that, like none of that should exist either, but people are, people, and they're going to do what they're going to do. And so you can't change them. You just got to live with it, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. But then so much of our LGBT culture has come from the US, Stonewall and
Mm.
even Pride. I mean, even this rainbow that I'm wearing on my
I have one on
t-shirt.
too.
Oh my gosh, let me see the t-shirt. Yes, yes, yes. I love this. I also love your backdrop, all of the fabulous, like, colorful things in your room is lovely. But all the
That would be
terminology.
the founder. That would be all Bobby. He is a
Wow,
huge Maryland freak. And this is not a backdrop. This is actually a room.
it's amazing. It's so
The
cool.
front area. Um,
I like to have my
but
backdrop with the bi pride flag, pink, purple, and blue.
so is
Um,
that how you identify?
yeah, so my platform is called Not Defining, because I kind of
I was curious.
identify as like quite fluid in
Okay.
just everything. When I was growing up, there were only like two things you could be, right? You could be straight or gay, and that was your lot. You could be a man or a
Right.
woman, and that's what you're going to get. Um, and I just kind of wasn't any of those things. I was like, okay, interesting. Yeah, I'm not fitting into any of these boxes. And that was the thing for me. I thought, because there was no one around talking about bisexuality, pansexuality, non-binary, like no one, it just wasn't there in the 80s and the 90s. I'm showing my age now. In the UK, because we had Section 28, which was this thing like you're not allowed to talk about it in schools and all the rest of it. Thanks, Conservatives. That was Margaret Thatcher who came up with that great idea. Um, and so I was like, well, I must be broken. There must be something wrong with me. And so I just hid it. And I felt so ashamed and I didn't talk to anyone about it, And I thought, well, no one's going to want to be with me. No one's going to accept me. No one's going to believe me. So it took me to, some really dark places. And I was like, well, I don't know what this is. I was attracted to like women, men, everything in between, sometimes nothing. Yes, Jess, the Iron Lady. Or we could call her other things, but we won't because this is a decent podcast. And that was it. So, like, fast forward to like a few years ago, I decided with the wonder that is social media, I thought, okay, well, I'm just gonna like start talking about the random chaotic nature of my gender and sexuality.
Right.
And no one's gonna get it. Everyone's gonna think I'm weird, but at least I'll have just said it. So I just posted something on Instagram, and no sooner had I done that than people started coming back and saying, oh my gosh, this is me. Like, wow, thank you for saying this. Like, you're expressing what I couldn't express myself. And I was like, oh, no way, there are more people like me. And so I kind of carried on. And very quickly, it just grew and grew and grew. And now I have a platform of over 60,000 followers.
Oh,
My
wow.
YouTube channel recently hit 1 million views. And apparently, it's a thing. Apparently, there are other people like me. So that was a blessing. And, I've got this book coming out and everything. So it's like, wow, I can't believe from such a low base, thinking there was no one like me, to now. But in answer to your question, bisexuality is something that I identify with. Pansexual also I use as well.
Okay.
Kind of either
Just
or.
all of the above, but none to put your finger on. Got it.
Yeah. Also the kind of the asexual spectrum a bit as well. Fluid, non-binary, gender fluid. I'm just in the middle, you know?
A little bit of
I
everything.
yeah, I kind of am I'm a person, and I sometimes feel attracted to people.
Right.
To put it as simply as I can. So whatever label is easiest, I think, is the thing for me. Whatever's gonna induce the least probing questions and things. So I'll use bi, because generally people are like, okay, although you do get a lot of questions about bi, and just like, so, yeah. That was a long answer. Right. That's me.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think a lot of my generation, which is Gen Z, unfortunately, I have to say it.
What's unfortunate about that? I love Gen Z. You are the leaders.
Well, there's that, but a lot of us take for granted what our fathers and mothers in the LGBTQ community actually did. Like, we take everything for granted because we're like, oh, well, we have it easy and we don't have to fight for anything. And then now we're actually learning really fast that we're going to have to stand up and fight if we want to continue being who we are. And none of us know how is the problem. Most of us don't know how, I should say. I mean, you have elder Gen Z like myself, but it's one of those things. I mean, I guess we're like, oh, it's not going to ever happen to us. And then, Roe v. Wade being overturned. And then now Obergefell is about to be in the lineup as well, which protects same-sex marriage. I mean, that's in the lineup to be overturned as well. And it's just like, we have to stand up. We have to fight. I mean, we can't just sit here and be silent because that never solved anything. And I think we're looking to the older generations of LGBTQ people, or like, hey, what do we do? Kind of thing. And it's just one of those things because they had to fight for everything that we have now. They paved the way for us to have it easy. And then now it's becoming a lot less easy. So it's just one of those things, like, we have to stand up, we have to fight for who we are. And I don't feel like it should have to be that way. But and you have politicians that are just like,
yeah, absolutely. And I really feel what you're saying, actually, about this kind of moment in history, because it's a moment in history. And when new generations come, in time when we're old and gray, and I'm even older and gray, I mean, I'm already...
You're not old. There's no gray hairs yet peeking through that I can at least visually see on the camera. So
I
you're
would
fine.
dye it as well, you know. I'm a queer man, you know. But when those new generations come in, they will be learning about 2025, you know, and they will be learning about you and me and, you know, the people
all of
who.
us that are, you know, either going to be old or dead and gone, whatever. But I mean, I hate to put it so, you know, just like nonchalant and just like, oh, well, you know, we might not be here kind of thing, but it's the truth.
Yeah. And but I think every generation, you know, you have your moments and
Robert,
you
we
have your
know.
challenges, right? And we have to, but we have to step up, and we don't know what's going to happen. You know, people back in Stonewall, people before that, people in, you know, times past who have fought for different things never knew. Like people during the AIDS crisis, they didn't know what was going to happen. It was like they weren't prepared for that.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like people who were fighting for same-sex marriage, like they didn't know how that was going to turn out. So we never know how it's going to turn out, but we believe that it's going to turn out right. And if you look at the progress that's been made and the way our community's been fighting and, you know, for our rights, we've come so far. So we don't go back. Like we just don't go back. We just don't know how it's going to turn out, but we know we're going to win. And this is just a new challenge. So I would say something to you and to anyone from Gen Z, any younger people who might be listening, like I stand on your shoulders because I'm a millennial and I grew up under like kind of gay and lesbian rights being kind of like one, like that was kind of my generation. It was amazing. But as someone who is a member of the less kind of recognized parts of the community, you know, someone who's not kind of identifying as gay, through that whole time, I was basically in the closet. Like I wasn't out. I didn't come out, as it were, until I was 30. And so really, it wasn't until Gen Z started talking about bisexuality, pansexuality, you know, fluidity, non-binary and gender fluid and trans, you know, all of the things that Gen Z have really kind of brought to light. That was the moment where I was like, oh, it's now safe for me to kind of like start talking about this, because you were the people that I was inspired by and who made it safe for me. So really, I always say that like the young people are doing so much, you just don't even know it. And the final thing I would say on that is that I do think that the kind of the Trump, Elon Musk kind of
oligarchy,
Nigel Farage in the UK, you know, all of these people, I think that brand of like quite extreme right-wing kind of homophobia, transphobia, I think it's a reaction. It's a reaction to how far we've come. You know, we are living more authentically. We are speaking out. We are living as ourselves. And, you know, we're coming so far.
Them.
And they are
always saw us in
pushing it back.
Yeah, they're just trying to knock us back. And that's not going to happen. At least not by force.
Yeah. But look how much energy they put into it and how kind of extreme it is. It's because they feel very, very threatened by it. So
they're threatened and they have to have a scapegoat, unfortunately. Right. And that's the way that they do. I mean, it's a fear tactic is all it is. They're like, oh, be scared of this thing so that way we can do this while, you know, you're over here being scared of this, then we can go over here behind your back and do whatever and pass these crazy laws and everything else. And you're like, well, I was too busy paying attention to this to notice what they were doing over here, kind of thing. And that's all it is. And if you actually sit there, you stop and you look behind everything and you see that the grass is not green at all, It's very much so brown, but they're sitting there, they're making out to be, oh, it's so gray over here, blah 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 blah, and this and the other, and you're just like, no, I mean, it's ridiculous. And I hate to say it, but the right wing media tends to target minorities in the States, and that is very true. They do.
Yeah.
And
it's
sucks.
exactly right.
It really does.
I made a video about this topic on my YouTube channel a week or so ago called "Why They Hate Us," and it was quite popular, and it talked, but because I actually, before I came into coaching and writing and stuff like that, I used to work in like the political sphere in the UK, and I think it's really interesting how right-wing parties tend to always have a scapegoat. As you said,
Mm-hmm.
they will scapegoat minorities. And you think to yourself, well, why is that? Like what's in it for them? And I think something people don't often realize is that right-wing parties, they generally serve the interests of the rich, right? So
Right.
they're going to implement laws and policies that support the rich. Like that's kind of what they're for in general. And so why would it serve the interest of rich people to like target minorities? Like it doesn't, like, LGBT people, for example, you can be rich or poor and queer. It's not like a thing. But the secret is that if you create a scapegoat, then you can create someone to blame for the economic problems, which are actually the fault of
that administration.
The elite, the rich. If you look at the US, for example, the top 10%, no, the top 1% of rich Americans hold 90% of your wealth. 90% in the hands of 1%.
And it should not be that way.
That's the problem. That's why people are poor. That's why people are struggling. That's why there's, not enough. And they want to divert attention away from that so that we're all so busy talking about trans rights and migrants and all this nonsense, which has no effect on the price of eggs, as they say. It really doesn't. I wish I, as a queer person, affected the price of eggs.
I know, right? I was affecting the price of eggs. Oh no, whatever will I do? Excuse the hell out of me.
Sometimes I go to the supermarket and I just like change the prices. I'm like, this is the queer agenda, Just put the price, right? But it's nonsense, right? It's just plain nonsense.
Right.
But it's a distraction.
I know, but it's
a distraction. But why don't we blame our problems on this rather than actually mobilizing,
opening up your eyes and not believing everything you see and actually doing your own research?
Yeah, so it's very, very clever, but it's old as the hills, and
people still fall for it here in the States. It's as old as time itself, but they still fall for it. And the saddest thing about it is that I think it's out of all the states that are deeply rooted Republican or conservative in the States, just also so happen to be the poorest states in the union here.
Yeah.
And the richest states are the blue states. And it's like, they're doing something different and they're doing it correctly, but you're too blind to see it. I'm not going to say that there's anything wrong with welfare. I have been on it myself as far as food stamps, stuff like that's concerned. Been there, done that. But the main user of government resources and financial help is also the poverty states, the red states, unfortunately. And I get canceled for it. I don't care. It's not going to hurt my feelings anything like that to get canceled. Go ahead, cancel me. Oh no. But it's factual. And I mean, it's I don't know. It's just one of those things. I mean, if people would actually sit down, do the research, just take the time, to educate themselves instead of going off of what everybody says on news media, the world would have a very different view on everything. Like if they would actually sit there and take the time out of their day just to research, trans healthcare, for example. I mean, I know that's a really easy one to do, but if you actually look at it, the amount of people that were happy with their transition, I think the study I read was 95% of the people that went through the full transition were genuinely happy with who they were. Mm-hmm. And then the other 5% were not, because for whatever reason, I guess they just didn't think it was what they set out to be. And I'm just like, honestly, as a trans person, it has become too, trans healthcare and HRT and everything has become too readily accessible, in my opinion. And I would get crucified for this. But if you really sit down there and think about it, back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, you had to do extensive therapy and everything else before they would allow you to go on hormones and start your actual transition. You had to live in your assigned gender role for a year prior, if I'm not mistaken, from what I've read. And nowadays, you can walk into a Planned Parenthood, or they have even access online now to where you can literally be like, okay, look, I have gender dysphoria. And then they will be like, okay, here's your prescription for hormones. At least that's how it is stateside. I'm not sure about in the UK, but I personally feel that it's too easy, and it has become a fad in the States. And that's the reason why everything has become so mainstream with trans and LGBTQ people. And it's for the wrong reason, if you ask me personally.
How
you feel about that, but
I won't obviously comment on the different legislation in the US and things, because you will know that better than I do. In the UK, it's extremely difficult to get. There are very, very long waiting lists and things. But then we still have people saying, "Oh, you can just you can just get it at any time," and they're giving it to children and stuff. And you're like, well, they're not. But there's just, I think,
right.
The important thing is to just look at the fact and what it is, and the statistics, like you say, and the actual medical, and psychiatric, advice, and just actually go from that. Because I think it's like anything, you look at birth control, right? So if somebody wants to take the pill, we've made a decision as a society in the UK that you should be able to go to your GP and ask for the pill, and you can even do it without going into the GP surgery. And they, if you're under 16, they won't inform your parents, because we've decided that that is something that's important, and the balance of benefit is such that we should do that. That is hormonal treatment, that all the rest of it, and it can have long-term side effects and so on and whatever. But there's no uproar about that. It's just oh no, we should allow that. And there are other things. For example, I think pretty much almost every surgical procedure has a higher rate of people being of regret than gender affirming care, hip operations, even people having children has a higher regret rate. People getting married, all kinds of different tattoos, piercings, cosmetic surgery, all of that stuff, and none of that stuff has any form of oh, you have to have therapy, or you have to be sure for a year. There's none of that. And yet all of that can be like life-changing and irreversible, and like all of that.
Right.
So
I mean, I
it's
wouldn't go
just
as far as saying that a tattoo would be. I mean, to some people, tattoos are therapy. So,
right,
I
but
mean,
it's all
right.
stuff,
No,
you
I
know, that's
understand what you're
big
saying.
and
Like,
is a
it
big
can
decision.
all
So
technically change your
yeah,
life and everything else. And yeah, no, I get
so
it.
so I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, but I just think that, like you say, we should just look at the situation, look at the policy, and make a sensible decision. Like,
Right.
and then it doesn't have to be a problem. It's all the politics on top of it, which just brings it out of that into like this crazy. And watch as well how much time and effort and energy, emotional energy, it takes for us to talk about these things and to defend them and to debate them and to discuss them and to have
Right.
to like explain them, and all the while that zapping energy from our joy, from
Right.
from other things that we could be creating or doing or standing up for or supporting one another. So I think that is a tactic as well. Why
Right.
should we be discussing, why should we be debating trans rights? Why should we be debating
Right.
LGBT rights? No,
We're
we should just
it's
yeah,
2025. Like, this should not even be a topic of conversation anymore for anybody across the
yeah,
world. I mean, not just
yeah.
stateside or UK side or anything like that. I mean, this should be just it's a basic human right, regardless. That's exactly what it boils down to.
Yeah, it's
It's health.
just
It's just like healthcare. Healthcare is a
it's,
basic human right.
yeah, and some things need a medical opinion, some things need a psychiatrist opinion. So just
Right.
listen to the sensible research and make a sensible policy and move on. Like
Right.
it's not a big intersex people. I think we forget as well.
Mhm.
Um, Intersex people who are people who are born with physical traits which don't kind
Of
of
both.
sit
Right.
in to male or female. And so intersex children have been operated on for many years to kind of reassign their gender to resemble the
Whatever the
binary.
parents want.
Exactly. So people are very, very happy to actually give gender reassignment
To
surgery to an
intersex.
unconsenting child,
Right.
which we know often causes damage later on in life.
Hmm. And it also
They're fine with
psychologically
that.
too, because sometimes they don't line up with how their parents want, because the parents choose
Yeah,
for their child. And in
right.
my opinion, that should not be a judge
Yeah,
the decision of a parent. That should be the
yeah,
decision of the child themselves on how they identify and how they want to identify.
yeah. But
If
then
they
it's
feel
not
like they align
okay.
more with the boy side of everything, then that's fine. Have the surgery and, you know,
Yeah,
at that point, but let the child choose, not just because, oh, well, my child's intersex, they have qualities of both. And like that should be the child's decision ultimately.
yeah. So it's just, I think we're living in a world where unfortunately there's a lot of kind of pseudoscience and ignorance around sexuality and gender. And so that's kind of what I try to do, is to um, just kind of share information so that people can kind of learn. And also, I love to share my experiences as well,
Right.
because I think that's so powerful. We're all different, you know, everybody is unique. And, I'm so grateful for you sharing your views, because, you know, like you were saying, oh, I might get stick for this or I might get cancelled for that. But like, you're a unique person. Like, one LGBT person isn't, homogenous with the rest of our community. We have
Right.
conservative
Everybody, we have
gay
the right to
people, we
our own
have
opinions.
Trump
Everybody has their own
supporting
opinion,
LGBT
and some
people. We
people,
have,
a lot of people may not line up with me, and that's
yeah,
fine.
yeah. And so I love it when we share just our authentic experiences. That's what Not Defining is all about. Robert, you asked, what is your YouTube channel? If you just search Not Defining, all one word, then you can find it
To look it up.
anywhere. Anywhere
It didn't
where
actually. I mean, I
anywhere
couldn't
where
even watch
Elon
it.
Musk does not run the platform. I used to have X, and then I came off it because it was not cute. Um, but yeah, so that's what I love to do, and just I think that we are. One thing that I will say is like, okay, so we have the politics, and it's
Mhm.
important, and it's a concern to everybody, and it's really a big part of our life. You can't be LGBT without being political, really. But you know what? Beneath that, every single day, people in our community are coming out. They're expressing themselves. They're talking to people. They're building communities. They're doing stuff. They're creating things. And actually, the reason why I got connected to this podcast, which is the most beautiful, beautiful story. And I actually feel emotional because I'm so proud of this guy, is one of my community called Kevin, who is a trucker, um, who he came on this podcast, and basically, came out and basically, spoke publicly for the first time uh, about his identity and things. And that was so inspiring, and he told me about it, and everything. And so it's these experiences, these stories, which are changing the world. Like, think how many people Kevin has inspired, his family, his children growing up, his wife, his trucking colleagues, um, like friends, people, and you never quite know who's going to be like influenced by you just living as you.
Right.
There'll be people who come to you and be like, oh, I've been really impacted by it. But like 99% of people won't say that, but they'll just be like, oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, I know this person called Ashley. Yeah, yeah. And, they're like this and that, it's like a reference for someone. And it's like, it's this ripple effect. And so
Right.
beneath the politicians' nonsense, we are making so many waves. And that's why things like this podcast is so fabulous, particularly in this industry, which can be really hard. Like, I respect you all so much because you are doing it. And once we share and once we get out to people, that's it. Like, there's no going back from that. So I feel
No,
really inspired by that.
I'm not a huge fan of the cancel culture that's coming around with the LGB without the T that's happening. I'm like, you do realize that the first brick at Stonewall was thrown by a trans woman. That's how Stonewall started.
Yeah.
Like, you don't even know your own history. But
Yeah.
you, but like, I don't know, like that. It's irritating to me because I'm like, we can't disband one portion of the community. You can't just cancel them out and be like, oh no, they don't exist anymore. Like, no, that's ostracizing and that's wrong. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but
It's just not, this is not, this is not going to happen. This
no.
is not even going to be discussed. And also, um, I kind of represent the bi community quite a lot here in the UK. I've kind of like hosted our main like bi conventions and stuff, Bi Pride UK and BiCon UK and things like that. So I've kind of inadvertently become quite a like mouthpiece for like the bi community. Um, and one of the things that I really love to talk about is the special connection that the B and the T have,
Mhm.
because trans is obviously a gender identity,
Right.
but what is the most common sexuality or orientation among trans people? Well, it's bisexual.
Right.
So most trans people are bi, and that comes as a surprise to a lot of people,
Mm.
because they don't make that connection. But of course, if you just think about it for a minute, it kind of makes sense. You know, if you have a more diverse or broad conception of your gender, like it makes sense that you'd be more likely to have a broad, diverse kind of spectrum of attractions or connections that you might be able to have. Obviously, not all trans people are, you know, but it's the most common thing for a trans person to be. So if you care about trans rights, then you care about bi rights, and vice versa. So if you're bi, or if you're like, we have this beautiful link. Also, for example, I, as a bisexual kind of male presenting person, I connect so much with trans people, you know, because, for example, a trans woman, who is she going to date? Is she going to date a straight man? Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe, you know, she might not feel comfortable. Is she going to date a gay man? Well, probably not, because he's probably so. If she is heterosexual, who's she going to date? Bi man. And I've had these wonderful connections with you know, trans people, because it's like we get each other on such an intimate level, you know, and we can be attracted to, or, you know, all of us. So I just always say that. And then the other thing is, who was it that organized the first ever Pride March? The Christopher Street protest, it was a bisexual woman called Brenda Howard. So, you know, a lot of people say, oh, you know, bisexual people, they're not queer enough, they're not really, you know, they're not part of the community and stuff like that. But we wouldn't have a Pride March if, you know, it wasn't for a bisexual woman. Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson, they were trans. They were fundamental, you know, kingpins of the Pride movement. They both expressed bisexual orientations. Marsha P. Johnson used the term gay a lot, which a lot of people did in that time, but actually they were both bi. So that's something that I love to highlight. And we should never forget that, at least as far as I'm concerned, being part of the B, there's no separation. Like, you can't split us up. It just, we are one another. It doesn't work. You ain't getting away with it, you know? It's not happening.
Anyways, I guess we're going to go and start winding down the podcast. It was amazing to speak with you. You were great to have on here today.
Thank you.
Great
and you
company.
too. I'm so pleased. Thank you so much for having me as a non-trucker on your wonderful podcast. I'm sorry that I couldn't say much about trucking, but hopefully I can say a lot about other things. Thank you so much for all that you're doing for our community, and just keep on doing what you're doing. To everyone listening, thank you so much for hearing me out.
All right. Well, I guess I'm going to go ahead and sign off, guys. Everybody stay safe, keep the shiny side up and the rubber side down. We'll see you guys later. Bye. Why did it not start? Come on. Oh, I bet I have to